It's time for Talk Law Radio with Todd Marquardt. Todd Marquardt, attorney at law in Texas. If you're a millionaire or a thousandaire, Talk Law Radio is now on the air. Call in with your business law question, your elder law question, veteran aid, Medicaid, build a business to get paid. 210-308-8867. Or ask a question online at marquardtlawfirm.com. That's MARQUARDT lawfirm.com. And now it's Talk Law Radio with Todd Marquardt.
Welcome to Talk Law Radio. I'm Todd Marquardt. Have you heard about the California lawsuit against Meta, the parent company for Facebook and Instagram? I'm going to be talking about that case and the Texas 10 Commandments law that requires schools to post the 10 Commandments in classrooms, and the court case that sought to stop classrooms from posting the 10 Commandments, and the appellate case which held that the law did not violate the First Amendment prohibition from establishing a religion. Finally, who said the following quote, "Success is to be measured by the position, not by the position that one has reached, but the obstacles which he has overcome." We'll find out. In our legacy segment, I'll talk about estate planning for unmarried individuals. Let's get started. A bipartisan coalition of state attorneys general sued Meta, which owns Facebook and Instagram, for designing its platform to be addictive to children and teens for profit, which publicly claimed that the applications were safe, but the complaint alleges that Meta had hidden research showing serious mental health harms, used manipulative features such as infinite scroll, filters, and notifications, and systematically violated the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act by collecting data from millions of children under the age of 13 without parental consent. Trial is underway in California seeking injunctions, penalties, and reforms. Here are some statistics that we found from Meta's own internal documents and external data cited in the lawsuit against them. Children under age 13, 4 million children under the age of 13 use Instagram in the United States. That's roughly 30% of all 10 to 12-year-olds. 20 to 60% are actively on the app during the month. And from 2019 to 2023, Meta received over 1.1 million reports that there were underage users on Instagram. At times, Meta had a backlog of 2 to 2.5 million under age 13 accounts awaiting review, while continuing to collect data in violation of that federal law. Here's some of the problems that parents have with the app. Public Community Standards Enforcement reports claim self-harm content was viewed on less than 0.05% of Instagram views, but Meta's internal surveys show 6.7% of users and 8.4% of 13 to 15-year-olds saw self-harm content in the last 7 days. And there's bullying on these apps. Public reports only show 0.05 to 0.06% of views, but Meta's internal research showed 28.3% of users witnessed bullying in the last week. There's also unwanted sexual advances. 13% of 13 to 15-year-olds in the last 7 days received unwanted sexual advances. In a 2018 internal study said that 5.1 million Instagram users were exposed to suicide or self-injury content each day. Isn't this just shocking? So that's why the lawsuit was filed. And here are some of the laws involved. I mentioned the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, which is in 15 U.S.C. section 6501, requires verifiable parental consent before collecting personal information from children under the age of 18 if the app has actual knowledge of the child or the service is directed to children. States allege that Meta has both actual knowledge, millions of reports and internal estimates, and that Instagram and Facebook are directed to children. State attorneys general have expressed authority to sue, and they also claim violations of unfair and deceptive practices under the Federal Trade Commission Act. The claims for unfair acts are based on designing addictive and harmful features while prioritizing profits. Deceptive acts include false safety claims, misleading reports, concealment of internal research. Doesn't this just make you upset? That's not what we want our children to be exposed to when they're at such a young age. Let me know what you think. You can email me at host@talklawradio.com. That's HOST@talklawradio.com. Or post a comment on YouTube. Find Talk Law Radio. Look for the Lady Justice logo in the red, white, and blue colors and post your comment. Let's discuss this situation. Okay, now I'm taking a turn to the Texas 10 Commandments statute. You know the 10 Commandments found in Exodus chapter 20, verses 3, 7, 8, and 12 through 17. And God spoke all these words, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above or on earth beneath or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God, and for the Lord will not hold anyone guiltless who misuses his name. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, but he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Honor your father and your mother, so that you may live long in the land the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not murder, shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house, shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male or female servant, his ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. Aren't those good rules to live by? Are you glad that the 10 Commandments are going to be posted in schools? Or do you think that that violates the United States Constitution, First Amendment prohibition against establishing a religion? Well, the statute can be found in Texas Education Code Section 1.0041, Display of the 10 Commandments. The lawsuit that was filed is called Mara Nathan et al. Versus Alamo Heights Independent School District et al. And it included several other Texas school districts, Northeast School District, Lackland, Northside, Lake Travis, Dripping Springs, Fort Bend, Cypress, Fairbanks, Plano. They sought pre-enforcement challenges claiming that the new law violated the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment and the Free Exercise Clause of the First Amendment. It was filed in the United States District Court, Western District of Texas, here in San Antonio. the court issued a preliminary injunction blocking the law and denied the school district's motion to dismiss, but the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals reversed the judgment, vacated the injunction, and rendered judgment dismissing the plaintiff's claims. And the reason why is that they interpreted the Establishment Clause by reference to historical practices and understandings. That means it's not a law that compels church attendance. It's not a law that requires formal religious exercise or a controlling doctrine, worship, governance. Doesn't punish dissenters, fines, doesn't exact religious taxes to support clergy, and it doesn't deploy churches for civic function. This law has none of those. It's a passive poster, no catechism, no recitation or affirmation, no penalties for disagreement, no regulation of churches, no forced support of clergy. Mere exposure to religious text is not coercive worship characteristic of historical establishments. So isn't that interesting? Well, the plaintiffs appealed to the Supreme Court of the United States. They're asking the court to grant certiorari, which means that the Supreme Court does not have to hear the case. They would hear the case if they want to hear it. Well, that's the Ten Commandments. And I'm going to move on to the sinners and the saints segment. Now, I usually only do this on Saturdays at 11 o'clock in the morning on KLUP 9:30 a.m. The Answer and 6:30 a.m. The Word, but I'm taking a time to let you know what it's about now so that maybe you'll listen on Saturdays as well. So I like to talk about the sinners and the saints because Martin Luther, the famous theologian who nailed his 95 Thesis to the church door, said we're all sinners and saints. We've sinned because Adam sinned and we're born into sin, but because of the birth, life, and death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, we've been forgiven and absolved. And so I like to highlight a sinner who's done something wrong and a saint who's doing something right. And the sinner this week is Chandler Bradford, who was found guilty by a jury recently for illegally selling and smuggling gun parts to cartels in Mexico and then laundering the money. He received millions, and so he's going to go to jail. He hasn't been sentenced yet, but the news report said that he sent enough parts for the cartel to build over 5,000 guns. So he's the sinner. The saint is the person who said that quote that I mentioned at the beginning of the show. Success is to be measured not by the position that one has reached, but the obstacles which he has overcome. So who do you think said that? I'll give you a hint. It was from the era of 1901. Well, I'll let you know, it was Booker T. Washington. And I'm sure that I learned about him in history back in grade school, but I had to do a little bit of research to find out what obstacles he overcame. He was born into slavery, and he was freed. He educated himself. He worked to pay for his education. And something that he's most famous for is he was the first teacher and founding principal at Tuskegee Institute, which is now known as Tuskegee University. Here's something even more interesting. I was talking about this with the staff at Marquardt Law Firm, and one of our staff, legal assistant Gabby Burns, mentioned that her grandfather went to the Tuskegee Institute, and he has passed away, and so she told me that his name was Eldridge Allen Burns Sr. He passed away here in San Antonio. He had a career in the Air Force, But he has a very interesting obituary because he did lots of other things. He spent 21 years in the Air Force, and then he worked and had distinguished careers at USAA and FEMA. He also worked for, he marched for civil rights, and so he just had a really interesting life, and I asked Gabby if I could talk about him with you on the radio, and she said, of course. I thought that was really neat. The last thing I'd like to talk to you about today is legacy. Marquardt Law Firm sponsors Talk Law Radio, and attorneys at Marquardt Law Firm focus on business and estate law, including last wills, living trusts, and tax-protected inheritance plans. It's all about legacy. And today, I'm going to talk about the legacy of unmarried individuals. What are the unique situations and issues that they face? So if you know somebody who's unmarried and has not done their estate planning, share this video with them and ask them to tune in every week to Talk Law Radio, where they can learn about their hidden legal issue blind spots. So the first thing that you need to be aware of if you're unmarried is that nobody naturally has permission to make decisions for you, to be your agent if you are unable to pay your bills, manage your business, or make medical decisions. And so that's what the durable power of attorney and the medical power of attorney are used, so that you can name somebody that you trust to make decisions if you're unable to. And if you don't have a spouse, if you don't have children, then who would you name? Well, I would suggest that you should choose well. Don't just choose anyone. And so here are some tips for choosing somebody that probably has the abilities and the mindset to make good decisions for you. Maybe choose somebody who promptly responds to time-sensitive phone calls and emails. If they're not responsive to you while you're healthy and alive, they may not be responsive to you if you're disabled or incapacitated. Are they able to manage important documents and deadlines? Now, you might have to interview your family members or your friends to find these answers out, but it's definitely worth it. Say, hey, dude, I'm unmarried and single, and I need to plan in advance just in case something tragic or catastrophic happens and I end up in a crisis. I'm looking for somebody. I'm interviewing to see who would be able to help me out in those circumstances. Choose somebody who's able to make difficult decisions under stressful circumstances. This might be a coworker, a neighbor, or a friend from church. What to look for in an executor or a personal representative? Somebody who's trustworthy, who has sound judgment and integrity, strong organizational skills and attention to detail. Maybe it's somebody who follows the 10 Commandments, persistence in completing paperwork and meeting deadlines, availability to communicate with attorneys, accountants, beneficiaries, and financial institutions. Somebody who's a good communicator. I like to joke with younger people in my family that if they can't keep their cell phone charged, they're not going to be my agent, my trustee, or my executor. So that shows responsibility, don't you think? Keeping your cell phone charged. Okay, let's move on to medical decisions. Maybe you choose somebody who's emotionally steady during stressful and uncertain situations, willing to ask questions and understand medical information. Healthcare providers are some of the busiest professionals we have in United States society. They're so busy, sometimes they just assume that you're going to follow along with the first suggestion that they give you. I like to name somebody who would confront that, who would say, why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? I know I sound repetitive, but you have to keep asking. What are the alternatives? What are the risks? Somebody who's assertive and will advocate for your wishes. Somebody who's available and has ability to respond at the drop of a hat in an emergency. Who's comfortable discussing serious illness, end-of-life care, and other sensitive matters. Of course, ability to communicate and collaborate with healthcare providers, and commitment to following your stated preferences, even if they're different. I think that's super important. Okay, what if you have a boyfriend or girlfriend? Well, did you ever think that maybe the hospital or doctor would refuse to share with them your protected health information? Because of the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, that's the federal law that makes your health information so private. Healthcare providers like doctors and nurses are not allowed to talk to anybody about your health condition unless they have permission. So you can sign a permission slip called a HIPAA authorization or a HIPAA release. You might name an emergency contact at your doctor's office or in the hospital. But what happens if you end up in front of a doctor that you've never met, that you never knew that you might need someday? A specialist who you never thought that you might need? Well, that's when this general HIPAA authorization might be important. And if you want your boyfriend or girlfriend to be able to visit you in the hospital, you might think about these legal documents that give them that permission. I understand some people don't want to get married. They don't want the old ball and chain. Well, without marriage, you definitely need to have written permission. Don't have anyone you trust? Think about hiring a professional, like a bank, trust company, or other professional fiduciary. Sometimes accountants, CPAs, or attorneys might fill this role. So here are some questions to ask them to find out if they're a good fit for you. How do you charge for your services? How do you document the transactions you conduct? And who may access those records? How long does it typically take to administer an estate or trust of this size and complexity? How often do you communicate with the beneficiaries and family members? Do you require specific provisions in the estate planning documents or any additional paperwork before you agree to serve? What have been your most successful and most challenging experience administering an estate or trust? And if you want a professional to make your medical decisions, it's probably even more difficult. There are professionals out there that can be your professional guardian, but this is where they would want to do a medical assessment ahead of time to get the detailed information of your history and background. I once volunteered to take my granddad to the doctor to have an outpatient procedure for back pain, and he had a grocery sack full of receipts and prescriptions and notes about prescriptions that he liked and didn't like. And when we showed up to the outpatient doctor, the doctor asked me about his medical history. This was a man 90 years old. I have known nothing about his medical history. And Granddaddy couldn't hear, and so he couldn't say anything either. I said, well, look in your computer. Hasn't he been here before? Haven't you asked these questions before? Well, anyway, that goes to show you the importance of giving information to the people you trust. And don't forget to do a will, because if you die without a will, that's called intestacy, and the state of Texas decides who gets to inherit your stuff. If you enjoyed today's show, do me a favor and subscribe to Talk Law Radio on YouTube. go to YouTube, search for Talk Law Radio, look for the Lady Justice logo in the red, white, and blue colors, and click subscribe. Thank you in advance. This is Talk Law Radio. I'm Todd Marquardt, and you can listen online anytime on Facebook, YouTube, and talklawradio.com. If you know anybody interesting that might be a good guest, go to talklawradio.com and click that button. I'll get your message. I'll talk to you later.